It's time for another all-time great rivalry, and this time it's the Magnolia Bowl between Ole Miss and LSU. Hello, everybody. You're listening to the College Sports Superfan. Today we're talking about number 9 Ole Miss at number 13 LSU. This is a fantastic rivalry game. It's been going on for a long time. In my opinion, it's probably one of the most underrated college football rivalry games. It always seems to be very entertaining. I think the reason why it's underrated is because the Louisiana State Tigers have typically had the edge over Ole Miss, but especially since the Rebels have gotten a lot better, this rivalry has become so much fun. So let's talk about it. And let's start with the road team Rebels, who are back in the AP top 10 after they went tumbling out of it because of their loss to Kentucky. They bounced back, beating South Carolina, who we've seen be a solid team, a South Carolina team that almost scared LSU and almost upset them. Ole Miss beat them 27-3 on the road, so a very nice bounce back for the Rebels. Quarterback Jackson Dart has been very good this year. He's got 2,100 yards. He's got a 73% completion percentage, 13 touchdowns with only 2 interceptions, plus 156 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Dart has been really good. Lane Kiffin has been known to be great with quarterbacks. Dart is just the next great one for him. And, we've seen it even back to when he played at USC and now with Ole Miss last season and this season. He has been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And he's got a fantastic group of playmakers on offense. This Ole Miss offense, as we know with Lane Kiffin, he's going to have an elite offense. This offense is so good. Running back Henry Parrish has 585 yards, which is 6.4 yards per carry, and 9 touchdowns. He's been an elite running back. Receiver Trey Harris has been one of the best wide receivers in the country. He has 918 yards and 5 touchdowns. He does have a fumble, but he has been elite. And the rest of this receiving core has been really good, too. You got Juice Wells, who's got 371 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also has a fumble, though. Jordan Watkins, who's got 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then the tight end, Caden Prescorn, has 194 yards and a touchdown. And he played in this game, last season against LSU as well. So this is a really good receiving core. They got a great signal caller. They have a fantastic running back who can mix it up as well. So it's very dangerous and fast-moving offense. But on defense, this is something where, coaches like Josh Heupel, coaches like Lincoln Riley, Lane Kiffin, all these brilliant offensive mind coaches sometimes don't get the credit that they deserve, in my opinion, for how they've rebuilt the defense as well. And as you can see in this game from last year, there wasn't a whole lot of defense that was played between these two teams. I think this could still be a high-scoring, fun game, but probably not to the level as last year because both of these defenses have gotten significantly better. Let's talk about the D-line for Ole Miss. Walter Nolan, big-time transfer in, has 24 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and a fumble recovery. J.J. Pegues has 17 tackles, a fumble recovery, and he also has multiple rushing touchdowns. I believe he has 4 rushing touchdowns because sometimes they put him in like the fridge, like the Chicago Bears used to have in the 1980s, like the fridge Perry, and they put Pegues in there, the jumbo package, hand him off the ball, and scores a touchdown. So he'll score some rushing touchdowns as well. And then you've also got Suntarine Perkins, who has 25 tackles, 4.5 sacks, and an interception, and Jared Ivey, who has 17 tackles. So this defensive line, I think, is just awesome. In my opinion, it's one of the most impressive defensive lines I've seen in the entire country, and it's right at Ole Miss. And then at linebacker, they've got a superstar. I mean, they stole this guy from Arkansas. He was really good with the Razorbacks last year. Now he's with Ole Miss. Chris Paul Jr., 41 tackles with 7 tackles for a loss. And then they've also got Kari Coleman, who has 26 tackles. Half of those are solo tackles. So he's got 13 solo tackles all on his own. So those two linebackers are really, really, really good. But Chris Paul Jr. is an absolute beast. So this front seven, very impressive for me. At defensive back, they've got some serious superstars there too in the secondary. Didn't used to be the case with Ole Miss, but now it absolutely is. Trey Amos has 28 tackles, 6 pass breakups, and 2 interceptions. He is a stud. He's been really, really good. Brandon Turnage, who they stole from Tennessee as well, that was another good pickup, has 16 tackles and an interception. Isaiah Hamilton has 13 tackles, 3 pass breakups. Safety Jaden Kennedy has 23 tackles. So they could be a little bit better at safety, but overall the secondary really, really good. So at all three levels, Ole Miss, believe it or not, actually has a great defense. So that's something to keep in mind for this Ole Miss team. That's what's made them so, so good. If you look at how much they've been scoring per game, how their defense is played, there's a reason why they are back in the top 10. But now let's talk about LSU, who's extremely impressive in their own right. And the good news about the Tigers is they're coming off of a bye week. They just beat down South Alabama to get some confidence back. Not that they needed it. They were doing pretty well in their last couple of games, but they beat down South Alabama. Then they head into a bye week, and now they've got this game at home at night. So a lot of things going the Tigers' way for sure. This schedule definitely lined up pretty well for them heading into this game against Ole Miss. Garrett Nussmeier has been an elite quarterback. So just talk about Jackson Dart, how good he is. Nussmeier, I've got to say, I'm going to give him the edge here. He's got 1,652 yards, a 70% completion percentage, 15 touchdown passes, and 4 interceptions. So his numbers are pretty close to Dart. Some areas a little bit better, some areas a little bit worse. But overall, I think Nussmeier is a slightly better signal caller. And at running back, it's been a journey for LSU. Let's just say that. But here's the really exciting thing about the Tigers. There is a freshman, Caden Durham, who would come out of nowhere, and he's becoming an elite running back right before our very eyes. He's got 249 yards, which is 8.9 yards per carry. And he's got 3 touchdowns, plus 130 yards receiving and 2 receiving touchdowns. And I think as the season goes on, as Durham gains more experience, he's just going to become more involved in this LSU offense. And then at receiver, look, LSU receivers, I don't know what it is. I don't know what their training is, but these Louisiana State receivers really are just built different. They've got so many great receivers in the NFL right now, just over the recent last few years. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, right? The guys that they've just put into the NFL, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, who you see in this game here, who were playing with Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels last year. Well, this season, they've got the next elite LSU wide receiver who's going to likely be a first-round NFL draft pick. Tyron Lacey has 352 yards and 5 touchdowns. And this guy is just an absolute superstar. And then they have a really good tight end, Mason Taylor, 280 yards and a touchdown. They've got another solid receiver in Xavier Thomas who has 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But again, with Nussmeier throwing them the football, they're going to get some good catches, that's for sure, because he is a great quarterback. So overall, the offense, they're starting to figure out the run game. That's going to make them a lot more dangerous, and they're going to need it against that good front seven that Ole Miss has, as I just said. On the defensive line, let's talk about LSU's defense. They have Braden Swinson, who has emerged out of nowhere. He's got 18 tackles and 5 sacks on the season. Savion Jones has 20 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks, and a fumble recovery. And then the Canadian Paris Shand has 11 tackles and 3 TFLs. But yeah, between Swinson and Jones, that's 9 sacks on the season right there. Those guys have been harassing quarterbacks so far, and that's a good thing to see if you're an LSU fan. And at linebacker, of course, Harold Perkins had a lot of hype. He has 16 tackles and a fumble recovery. But really, there's these 2 other guys at linebacker. Each one has 38 tackles. Glenn Penn III and Whit Weeks. These 2 guys have been superstars. Perkins had a lot of hype heading into the season, but both of those guys have been tackling machines. Again, 38 tackles for both Glenn Penn and Whit Weeks. And I also like those names because they're so easy to say as well. Glenn Penn and Whit Weeks. But in any case, they both have 38 tackles. At defensive back, they've gotten really good too. Ash Stamps has 19 tackles, 3 pass breakups. You've got Major Burns, who had a lot of hype heading into this season as well, and for good reason. He's got 27 tackles and a fumble recovery. And then there's this kid, freshman Deshaun Spears. He's got 15 tackles. And then Sage Ryan has 14 tackles. So at every level, this defense is really, really good. It's kind of hard to say, in my opinion, who has the better defense at this point. It's kind of tricky on that one. But both of these teams used to have really bad defenses, and they've both improved it drastically. So I do think, of course, it's still going to be both these offenses are still electric. They're still going to put points on the board, but I do think the defenses are going to be tighter in this year's game versus last year's game, as you can see. And that's not because the offenses have gotten worse. I truly believe the defenses have gotten better. As of right now, Ole Miss is a 3.5 point favorite, and the line seems to be shifting more and more in the Rebels' favor because the first time I checked it, they were 2.5 point favorites, then it went to 3 point favorites. Then, as I'm recording this video, it went to 3.5. So, slowly, people are starting to pick Ole Miss more to win this game. Well, what is the history of this rivalry, and what do I think is going to happen in this game? Well, LSU leads the all-time series 65-42 with 4 ties in there. The Rebels, as you can see in this game, last year it was a thriller, and they won 55-49. 55-49, just a ridiculously high-scoring game. I don't think we're going to get up to that again this year, but I do think it is going to be still a fun, relatively high-scoring game. But here's the tricky thing. Ole Miss has not won in Baton Rouge since 2008. And a night game in Death Valley is extremely, extremely difficult to win. You have to be a very, very good team to go in there and do that. And yes, they are top 10, but still, this is going to be a tricky one. These two have been playing each other since 1894, and back in 1894, Ole Miss won 26-6. And the reason why this is called the Magnolia Bowl is because the magnolia flower is the official state flower in both Louisiana and Mississippi. So it's just some kind of nice fun facts for that right there. But what do I think is going to happen? Who do I think is going to win this game? Well, here's my opinion on it. LSU wants revenge from last year. And I think they're feeling like they're being disrespected slightly, still being out of the top 10. And it's really, really hard to pick against them when they're at home, coming off of a bye week at night. To me, it's just a tricky spot. Even though I think the Rebels are a really good team, I think these two are pretty even. And those scenarios and those situations benefit LSU a lot. So give me the Tigers to win this game by 3. Because the other key point, again, LSU has a great quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier, and even though Ole Miss has some serious dudes in the secondary, they've still been giving up nearly 204 yards per game to opposing quarterbacks, and they really haven't been playing the best quarterbacks, and now they're going up against one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I think LSU outscores Ole Miss. They end up winning this one in a thriller by 3. All right, thank you guys so much for listening and watching the College Sports Superfan. Stay tuned because we still have the big game of the week and also the fan game of the week as well, which you guys can vote in that one. I will close it down Wednesday here, which will actually today as I'm uploading this video. So it'll close down tonight, so stay tuned for that and continue to vote in that poll so I can pick the fan game of the week. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Please be sure to like and subscribe.